I'm Serafina Walsh, 32, and last Easter Sunday changed everything I thought I knew about family loyalty. What started as a simple phone call about brunch plans turned into the moment I discovered my parents had been systematically excluding me from family gatherings for months, all while my golden child brother orchestrated it from behind the scenes. The betrayal cut so deep that I decided to host my own Easter celebration at my Napa Valley vineyard, inviting everyone they'd rather keep me away from. By evening, my phone was buzzing with calls that would expose 20 years of lies. Hey everyone, before we dive into this absolutely wild family drama, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from today. If you've ever felt like the black sheep in your family, you're going to want to stick around for this one. Hit that like button if you're ready for some serious family revenge karma. And don't forget to subscribe, because trust me, this story has twists you won't see coming. Now, let's get into how one Easter brunch invitation changed my entire family dynamic forever. Growing up, I was what you'd call the family overachiever. Valedictorian at Stanford, MBA from Wharton, and by 28 I'd built a tech startup that sold for enough money to buy a $6 million vineyard in Napa Valley. You'd think my parents Margaret and Richard Walsh would be proud. And they were when it served their narrative. My younger brother Mason was always the family favorite despite being a perpetual disappointment. He dropped out of 3 colleges, bounced between jobs, and at 29 still lived in my parents' guest house. But Mason had something I apparently lacked the ability to make my parents feel needed. While I was busy succeeding, he was busy manipulating their emotions with sob stories and promises he never intended to keep. The dynamics became crystal clear during family gatherings. Mason would arrive empty-handed while I brought expensive wine and thoughtful gifts. He'd monopolize conversations with tales of his latest business venture while my actual achievements were glossed over with a polite, "That's nice, dear." I told myself it didn't matter. I had my own life, my own success, my own beautiful property, where I could retreat from their obvious favoritism. What I didn't realize was how deep the favoritism ran, or how actively they were working to reshape our family's social circle around Mason's comfort level. For months I'd been hearing secondhand about family dinners, birthday celebrations, and holiday gatherings that I somehow never received invitations to. When I'd ask about them, my mother would claim they were last minute or just small affairs. I believed her because I wanted to believe that my family, despite their flaws, wouldn't deliberately exclude me. The vineyard had become my sanctuary. Nestled in the rolling hills of Napa with sprawling views of meticulously maintained grapevines and a main house that featured floor-to-ceiling windows, showcasing the valley's natural beauty, it represented everything I'd worked for. The property included a state-of-the-art kitchen perfect for entertaining multiple guest suites and outdoor spaces designed for hosting memorable gatherings. I'd bought it not just as an investment but as a place where I could eventually bring my family together, somewhere beautiful enough to remind us all of what really mattered. Little did I know that while I was dreaming of family reunions under my pergola, they were actively planning celebrations without me. The Easter brunch situation wasn't an oversight or a miscommunication. It was a deliberate choice orchestrated by people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. The realization would shake everything I thought I knew about my place in the Walsh family hierarchy. Looking back, there were signs I should have recognized earlier. The way conversations would suddenly stop when I entered a room. The inside jokes I wasn't part of. The knowing glances between Mason and my parents when certain topics came up. But I was so focused on being the successful daughter, the one who had everything figured out, that I missed the subtle ways they were writing me out of the family story. My parents had mastered the art of making their favoritism seem natural and justified. They'd convinced themselves that Mason needed more support because he was struggling while I needed less because I was thriving. They failed to recognize that emotional support isn't a zero-sum game, and that pushing away the successful child to prop up the struggling one creates resentment and dysfunction for everyone involved. The pattern had been building for years, but I'd attributed it to typical family dynamics rather than recognizing it as systematic exclusion. Every missed invitation was explained away. Every conversation that stopped when I entered the room was dismissed as coincidence. Every family joke I wasn't part of was rationalized as something that had developed naturally while I was busy with work. But the truth was becoming undeniable. My success had made me a threat to the narrative my parents wanted to maintain about Mason. As long as I was present, as an example of what independence and achievement could look like, it became harder for them to justify enabling his dependence. So, instead of encouraging him to grow, they chose to minimize my presence in his life. The realization was devastating not just because of what it meant for my relationship with my parents, but because of what it revealed about how they viewed love and support. They'd turned family into a competition where only one child could win their attention and care. And they'd rigged the game to ensure that the child who needed them most would always be the victor, regardless of the cost to their other relationships. The call came on Thursday before Easter. I was reviewing quarterly reports in my home office, overlooking the vineyard, when my phone rang. It was my mother, her voice carrying that artificially sweet tone she used when she wanted something. "Serafina, darling, I hope you have lovely plans for Easter Sunday. We're doing a small brunch this year, nothing fancy." The way she said it felt wrong, like she was delivering a script rather than having a conversation with her daughter. "I don't have plans yet," I replied, expecting the obvious invitation. "What time should I come over?" The pause that followed lasted several seconds too long. "Oh, honey, I think there might be some confusion. This is really just for the immediate family. You understand." I didn't understand. "Mom, I am immediate family. I'm your daughter." Another pause. "Well, yes, of course you are. It's just that Mason has been going through such a difficult time lately, and he specifically asked for this to be intimate. You know how sensitive he can be." The words hit me like a physical blow. My brother's sensitivity had become the family's excuse for everything over the years. Sensitive about my success, sensitive about comparisons, sensitive about sharing attention, and apparently now sensitive enough that I couldn't attend my own family's Easter celebration. "So let me understand this correctly," I said, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. "You're excluding me from Easter brunch because Mason doesn't want me there. Don't be dramatic, Serafina." "It's not about excluding anyone. It's about creating a comfortable environment for everyone. Everyone except me, apparently." My mother sighed heavily. "You have your beautiful vineyard and your successful life. You don't need us the way Mason does. Surely you can understand that." That's when it clicked. This wasn't just about Easter brunch. This was about a fundamental shift in how my family saw me. I had become too successful, too independent, too threatening to the narrative they wanted to maintain. Mason needed to be the center of attention, and my presence reminded everyone of what he wasn't accomplishing. After hanging up, I sat in my office for nearly an hour, staring out at the vineyard. The property that I'd seen as my sanctuary suddenly felt like evidence of my exile. I'd worked my entire life to make my family proud, only to discover that my success had made me unwelcome at their table. But then something shifted. Why was I sitting here feeling sorry for myself when I had something they could never take away? I had this incredible property, financial independence, and most importantly, I had the power to create my own family traditions. If they wanted to exclude me from their small, sad brunch, I'd show them what a real Easter celebration looked like. I picked up my phone and started making calls. First, to my college roommate Jessica, who lived in San Francisco. Then, to my business partner David and his family. My neighbor Elena, who'd become a close friend. My cousins on my father's side, who I realized I hadn't seen in months. Each conversation revealed the same pattern they'd all been told by my parents, that I was too busy to attend various family functions. The web of lies was more extensive than I'd imagined. My parents had been systematically isolating me from our extended family and mutual friends, claiming I was unavailable or uninterested in spending time with them. Meanwhile, they'd been building Mason up as the devoted son who never missed an opportunity to be with family. By Friday evening, I had 23 people confirmed for Easter brunch at the Vineyard. Not only had everyone accepted enthusiastically, but several had expressed relief that they'd finally be able to catch up with me. Apparently, my absence from family events had been noticed and questioned, but my parents had been skillful in their explanations about my busy schedule and different priorities. The irony wasn't lost on me. In trying to diminish my place in the family, they'd created an opportunity for me to discover who actually valued my presence in their lives. Each person I called had a story about missing me at family functions, and each had been given a slightly different explanation for my absence. My cousin Rachel had been told I was going through a difficult personal phase and needed space. My neighbor Elena had heard that I'd become too focused on work to prioritize relationships. My business partner David had been informed that I thought family gatherings were beneath my new social status. The consistency of the lies revealed how calculated this campaign had been. My parents hadn't just been making excuses in the moment. They'd been crafting a comprehensive narrative designed to isolate me from my support network while protecting Mason from any reminders of what independence and success looked like. But what they hadn't counted on was my refusal to accept their narrative. By hosting my own Easter celebration, I was about to create an opportunity for everyone to compare notes and discover the truth about what had really been happening within our family dynamics. Saturday morning arrived with perfect California weather, sunny skies, and a gentle breeze that carried the scent of blooming flowers across the vineyard. I woke up energized by the prospect of hosting what would undoubtedly be the most important Easter celebration of my life. This wasn't just about proving a point. It was about reclaiming my narrative and showing everyone what genuine hospitality looked like. I'd hired a catering team from one of Napa's finest restaurants, arranged for a live acoustic duo, and transformed my outdoor terrace into an elegant brunch setting with white linens, fresh flowers, and place settings that sparkled. In the morning sun, the menu featured everything from traditional Easter dishes to California-inspired cuisine that showcased local ingredients. I'd even arranged for a wine tasting featuring selections from my own vineyard alongside other prestigious Napa labels. As I supervised the final preparations, my phone rang. It was my cousin Rachel, my father's sister's daughter, whom I hadn't spoken to in nearly 6 months. "Sarah, I can't tell you how excited I am about tomorrow. I've missed you so much at family things. Your mom always said you were too swamped with work to hang out with us regular folks." Her voice carried a hint of something suspicion maybe, or newfound understanding. "Rachel, when's the last time you actually heard from me directly saying, 'I was too busy for family'?" The silence on the other end told me everything I needed to know. Now that I think about it, I don't think I ever have. It was always your parents explaining your absence. That conversation confirmed what I'd been suspecting. My parents hadn't just been excluding me from events. They'd been actively managing the narrative around my absence, painting me as someone who'd become too successful and important to bother with family relationships. The manipulation was more sophisticated than I'd given them credit for. By 10 a.m. Sunday morning, my vineyard was transformed into something that belonged in a luxury lifestyle magazine. Guests began arriving at 11, and the energy was immediately different from typical Walsh family gatherings. People were genuinely happy to see each other, conversations flowed naturally, and there was none of the underlying tension that usually accompanied events where Mason was the center of attention. Jessica arrived first, bringing mimosa ingredients and a knowing smile. "Girl, this place is insane. No wonder your parents are threatened." She wasn't wrong. The vineyard in full spring bloom was breathtaking, and the brunch setup rivaled anything you'd find at the most exclusive resorts. As more guests arrived, a pattern emerged. Nearly everyone had a story about missing me at family functions, and nearly everyone had been told the same thing by my parents, that I was too busy, too focused on work, too important now to prioritize family time. The consistency of their lies was almost impressive in its thoroughness. My business partner David arrived with his wife and twin daughters, immediately gravitating toward the wine tasting station I'd set up near the vineyard's main production area. "Sarah, this is incredible. When your dad said you'd become too busy for family stuff, I figured you were just buried in work. But this is you creating space for people you care about." "Wait, when did my dad tell you I was too busy for family stuff?" David looked confused. "At Mason's birthday party last month. He said you'd been invited but had some big business deal that weekend." My heart sank. There had been no invitation to Mason's birthday party, and there had been no business deal that weekend. I'd actually spent that Saturday at home wondering why my family hadn't mentioned my brother's birthday, assuming they'd forgotten to include me in the planning. The revelations kept coming throughout the morning. My neighbor, Elena, mentioned running into my mother at the grocery store, where Margaret had explained that I'd become a bit too successful for my own good and was distancing myself from the family. My cousin James revealed that my parents had told everyone I was going through a phase where I thought I was better than everyone else. Each story added another layer to the picture of systematic character assassination my parents had been conducting behind my back. They weren't just excluding me. They were rewriting history to make me the villain of my own family story. But here's the thing about hosting 23 people at a stunning vineyard estate: word gets around. Social media posts started appearing by noon, featuring the gorgeous setting, incredible food, and most importantly, tags identifying the location. My vineyard's Instagram account, which I rarely used for personal content, suddenly showed up in dozens of stories and posts from guests who were genuinely enjoying themselves. The gathering had an energy that I'd forgotten was possible at family events. People were laughing without worrying about saying the wrong thing. Conversations were flowing without the undercurrent of tension that came from walking on eggshells around someone's feelings. Children were playing freely without being shushed to protect an adult's fragile ego. My cousin Tom, who I hadn't seen since Christmas, pulled me aside during the main brunch service. "Sarah, I have to ask you something. Mom told me you specifically said you didn't want to be invited to my engagement party because you thought it would be too small scale for someone of your status. Did you actually say that?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. "Tom, I never even knew you were engaged." "When did this happen?" His face went pale. 3 months ago. We had a big party at the country club. Your parents were there, and when I asked where you were, they said, what I just told you." Tom's engagement party, a milestone moment I should have been part of, had been another opportunity for them to paint me as arrogant and selfish while positioning themselves as the understanding relatives who made excuses for my terrible behavior. By 2 p.m., as we were settling into the main brunch service, my phone started buzzing with calls from familiar numbers. First my mother, then my father, then Mason. I ignored them all, focusing instead on the lively conversations happening around my table, where people were genuinely enjoying each other's company without the toxic undercurrents that had become standard at Walsh family events. The wine tasting had become an impromptu celebration of my achievements, with guests toasting not just the excellent selections, but the fact that I'd built something beautiful and chosen to share it with people who appreciated both the vineyard and my presence in their lives. David raised his glass and said to Sarah, who created something amazing and invited us all to be part of it. This is what family should feel like. You know what? If you're watching this and thinking about your own family dynamics, I need you to pause and really consider something. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love us most are actually the ones working hardest to diminish our light. I'm curious, have you ever felt like you were being pushed out of your own family? Drop a comment and let me know, because what happened next in my story is going to blow your mind. But first, smash that like button if you think family karma is real, and subscribe because we're just getting to the good part. The calls kept coming, but I was done being available whenever my family decided they needed something from me. For once, I was exactly where I wanted to be, with people who actually valued my presence. And judging by the increasingly frantic voicemails, my absence was finally being noticed by the people who'd taken it for granted for far too long. The afternoon sun was casting golden light across the vineyard, and I realized that this was what I'd been searching for all along: not just family, but chosen family. People who celebrated my successes instead of feeling threatened by them. People who valued my presence rather than seeing it as something to be managed or minimized. As the afternoon progressed and my phone continued its relentless buzzing, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of continuing to ignore the calls, I decided to answer one, but not in the way my family expected. The next call was from Mason, and I answered it on speakerphone while standing in my kitchen, surrounded by several close friends who'd been hearing bits and pieces of the family drama throughout the day. "Sarah, what the hell is going on? Mom's having a meltdown because apparently you threw some big party and didn't invite any of us. She's acting like you did it specifically to hurt her." The audacity was breathtaking. "Mason, let me ask you something. When exactly was I invited to your Easter brunch? That's different. You know this was supposed to be a small thing. Just immediate family." "I am immediate family. You know what I mean. You've got your whole life figured out. I don't need what, Mason? A relationship with my parents, a place at my own family's table. Help me understand what it is that I don't need." The silence stretched long enough that I thought he might have hung up. When he finally spoke, his voice carried an edge I'd rarely heard before. "You don't need to make everything about yourself. Some of us actually need support from our family." "And what support exactly are you getting that requires my absence?" "Financial support, emotional support, a place to live while I figure things out." Things that are harder to ask for when you're sitting there in your perfect life, making everyone else feel like failures. There it was, the truth I'd been circling around for months. My success wasn't just making Mason uncomfortable, it was interfering with his ability to manipulate our parents for money and housing. As long as I was present as an example of what independence and achievement looked like, it became harder for him to maintain his position as the family member who needed constant rescue. Jessica, who'd been listening to the conversation, grabbed my laptop and started pulling up social media posts from the brunch. "Sarah, you need to see this," she whispered, showing me a screenshot of my mother's Facebook page. My mother had posted a lengthy status update about ungrateful children who use their success to punish family members and the pain of watching your daughter choose money over love. The post had been up for less than an hour and already had dozens of comments from family friends expressing sympathy for her situation. But here's where my mother's plan backfired spectacularly. Several of the people commenting were actually at my brunch, and they'd started responding with their own experiences. Rachel had posted a comment explaining how she'd been told repeatedly that I was too busy for family events, only to discover I'd never actually been invited. David had shared his confusion about being told I'd skipped Mason's birthday for work, when no invitation had ever been extended. The comment thread was becoming a real-time exposure of my parents' manipulation with family, friends, and extended relatives, comparing notes about the different stories they'd been told about my absence from various events. Mason was still on the phone, apparently unaware of the social media drama unfolding. "Look, can we just figure out how to move past this? Mom wants you to come over tomorrow so we can all talk." Now she wants to talk, after months of excluding me and lying to our entire family about why I wasn't around. What lies? Nobody lied about anything. That's when I realized Mason genuinely didn't understand the extent of our parents' manipulation. He'd been so focused on securing his position as the favored child that he hadn't paid attention to how they were achieving it. He thought I'd simply been too busy or uninterested in family time because that's what they'd told him too. "Mason, when's the last time you asked Mom or Dad whether they'd actually invited me to something I didn't attend?" Another long pause. "I just assumed. I mean, you never showed up, so I figured. You figured I was choosing not to participate, but you never once thought to ask me directly." The conversation was interrupted by my father calling on the other line. I conferenced him in without warning Mason. "Serafina, your mother is extremely upset. This little stunt of yours has created a lot of hurt feelings and confusion in the family. Dad, Mason's on the line too. I want you both to hear this. How many family events have I been invited to in the past 6 months?" My father's response was immediate and telling. "You know you're always welcome in our home." "That's not what I asked. How many specific invitations did you extend to me for family gatherings in the past 6 months?" The silence from both my father and brother spoke volumes. Meanwhile, my kitchen had filled with friends who were witnessing this confrontation in real time, their faces showing a mixture of sympathy and outrage on my behalf. "Being part of this family shouldn't require formal invitations," my father finally said. "You should know you're welcome. But Mason's comfort level apparently does require my specific exclusion. How do you reconcile those two statements?" It was Jessica who provided the breakthrough moment. She'd been scrolling through her own social media and suddenly looked up with wide eyes. "Sarah, your cousin Rachel just posted screenshots of text messages. You need to see this right now." She handed me her phone showing a Facebook post where Rachel had shared screenshots of a group text thread that included my parents, several aunts and uncles, and some family friends. The messages, dating back several months, showed my parents actively coordinating to keep me away from family events, while telling everyone different stories about why I wouldn't be attending. One message from my mother read, "Please don't mention the birthday dinner to Serafina. Mason's really struggling with self-esteem issues right now, and having her there with all her success stories just makes him feel worse about himself." Another from my father, "We're trying to give Mason space to be the center of attention for once. Sarah dominates every conversation with her business talk." The most damning was a message where my mother explicitly asked family members not to invite me to events they were hosting, claiming it would be better for family harmony if I remained focused on my career instead of family relationships. "Dad, are you seeing Rachel's Facebook post right now?" I asked, my voice deadly calm. "I don't know what you're talking about. Check your phone. Check Facebook. Rachel just posted screenshots of the family group text where you and Mom spent months coordinating to exclude me from family events while lying to everyone about why I wasn't attending." The silence that followed was deafening. Through the phone, I could hear my father typing on his phone, presumably pulling up the Facebook post that was now being shared and commented on by dozens of family members and friends. "We can explain," my father started. "No," I cut him off. "You can't explain this away. You systematically excluded me from family events, lied to our entire extended family about my availability and interest in maintaining relationships, and convinced Mason that I was choosing to abandon the family when you were actively pushing me out. What happened next was like watching a dam burst in slow motion. Rachel's Facebook post sharing the family group text screenshots went viral within our extended family and friend network faster than I could have imagined possible. Within 2 hours, it had been shared dozens of times, commented on by nearly everyone who'd attended my Easter brunch, and had sparked a flood of revelations from people who'd been receiving conflicting information about family events for months. My phone was now ringing continuously, not just from my parents and Mason, but from extended family members who were piecing together their own experiences with my parents' manipulation. My Aunt Linda called to apologize for not questioning why I'd supposedly declined every invitation to family gatherings. My cousin Tom revealed that he'd been told I'd specifically requested not to be invited to his wedding reception because I thought it would be too small for someone of my status. The lies were more extensive and more cruel than I'd ever imagined. My parents hadn't just been excluding me. They'd been systematically destroying my reputation within our family network, painting me as an arrogant snob who'd outgrown her roots and looked down on everyone else's more modest achievements. But the most devastating revelation came from my elderly grandmother, who called in tears. "Serafina, sweetheart, I've been so worried about you. Your parents told me you'd been struggling with some personal issues and needed space from the family. I've been respecting your privacy and not reaching out, but seeing all these posts today, I think I've been terribly misled." My grandmother, who I'd always been close to, had been told I was going through a difficult period and had specifically asked family members not to contact me unless it was an emergency. She'd spent months worried about my well-being, while I'd spent the same months wondering why she'd suddenly become distant and stopped calling for our usual weekly conversations. The manipulation was so thorough, so systematic, that it had effectively isolated me from my entire extended family network. My parents had created a narrative where I was simultaneously too successful to need family support and too troubled to maintain healthy family relationships. It was masterful gaslighting on a family-wide scale. Meanwhile, the social media storm was intensifying. Family friends were sharing their own stories of receiving contradictory information about my availability and interest in maintaining relationships. The wife of one of my father's business partners posted about how confused she'd been when I didn't attend their anniversary party, especially after my mother had specifically told her I'd said their celebration wasn't worth my time. I had never said anything of the sort. I had never even known about their anniversary party. Elena, my neighbor who'd become a close friend, was documenting the entire unfolding drama on her Instagram stories, and her followers were sharing it further. The hashtag number Easter Revenge had started trending in our local social media circles, with people sharing their own stories of family manipulation and exclusion. But the most impactful response came from an unexpected source. Mason's ex-girlfriend Kelly, who I'd always liked but hadn't spoken to since their breakup 2 years earlier, posted a lengthy comment on Rachel's Facebook thread that changed everything. "I can't stay quiet about this anymore," she wrote. "When I was dating Mason, I watched his parents systematically manipulate family dynamics to keep him dependent on them. They would actively sabotage his relationships with anyone who encouraged his independence, including his own sister. I remember Margaret telling me that Serafina's success was toxic for Mason's self-esteem, and that the family was better off when she wasn't around to show off. They were proud of keeping her away from family events because it meant Mason got all the attention and support. It wasn't about protecting Mason's feelings, it was about maintaining control over him by eliminating any examples of what healthy independence looked like. Kelly's comment included details about conversations she'd witnessed where my parents had explicitly discussed strategies for managing my presence in the family. They'd talked about me like I was a problem to be solved, rather than a daughter to be loved. According to Kelly, my mother had once said that my success made it harder for them to maintain Mason's dependence because I served as a constant reminder that he could choose to become self-sufficient. The revelation reframed everything. This wasn't just about sibling favoritism or protecting Mason's feelings. This was about my parents actively working to maintain a dysfunctional family dynamic that served their need to feel needed. My independence threatened their role as Mason's saviors, so I had to be marginalized to preserve their codependent relationship with him. As evening approached, my vineyard was still full of guests who'd extended their stay to witness this family drama unfold in real time. What had started as an Easter brunch had become a kind of intervention, with people sharing their own experiences of family manipulation and offering support for what I was going through. David pulled me aside as the sun was setting over the vineyard. "Sarah, I hope you realize what you've accomplished here. You didn't just expose their lies, you created a space where people felt safe to tell the truth about what they'd experienced. That takes incredible courage." He was right. By hosting my own Easter celebration and refusing to accept my family's narrative about my place in it, I'd created an opportunity for truth-telling that went far beyond my own situation. People were realizing they'd been receiving manipulated information about family dynamics for years, and they were finally comparing notes in a way that revealed the extent of my parents' control tactics. But the social media explosion had consequences beyond just exposing the truth. My mother's original Facebook post about ungrateful children had backfired so spectacularly that she deleted it, but not before it had been screenshot and shared by multiple people. The comment thread had become a public airing of family secrets that painted my parents in an increasingly unfavorable light. My father's business reputation was taking a hit as his associates began questioning his honesty and integrity based on the family manipulation tactics that had been exposed. My mother's social circle was fracturing as friends realized they couldn't trust her version of events about anything. The karma was swift and comprehensive. By trying to control the narrative around my family relationships, my parents had lost control of their own narrative entirely. The very social media platforms they'd been using to manage perceptions about me had become the vehicles for exposing their manipulation tactics to everyone they'd been trying to impress. But I knew the real reckoning was still coming. My parents had been calling nonstop, and eventually I was going to have to face them directly. The social media exposure had made it impossible for them to continue their manipulation campaign, but it had also backed them into a corner where they'd either have to acknowledge their behavior or double down on their justifications. As my guests finally started heading home, each one expressing gratitude for being included in such a meaningful day, I realized that regardless of what happened next with my parents, I'd already won. I'd reclaimed my narrative, exposed the truth, and created genuine connections with people who valued my presence in their lives. The confrontation I'd been avoiding finally came the next morning when my parents showed up at my vineyard unannounced. I watched through my kitchen window as their car pulled up the long driveway, both of them looking grim and determined. Mason wasn't with them, which told me everything I needed to know about who they considered the real problem in this situation. I met them on my front porch, choosing not to invite them inside. The symbolism wasn't lost on any of us. After months of excluding me from their home, they were now being kept at arm's length from mine. "Serafina, we need to talk about this situation," my father began, his voice carrying the authoritative tone he'd used when I was a child in trouble. Which situation, Dad? The situation where you've been lying to our entire family about me for months, or the situation where you got caught? My mother stepped forward, her eyes red from crying. We never meant to hurt you. We were just trying to protect Mason during a vulnerable time. Protect him from what? From having a sister who loves him. From seeing that it's possible to build an independent life. What exactly were you protecting him from? The question hung in the air because we all knew the answer. They'd been protecting Mason from reality, from consequences, from the natural motivation that comes from seeing others succeed through hard work and good choices. They'd been enabling his dependence by removing any examples of what independence looked like. You don't understand how sensitive Mason is, my mother continued. Your success makes him feel like a failure. And your solution was to make me disappear rather than help him address his feelings about his own choices. My father tried a different approach. We thought you'd be fine without us. You have everything you need: money, success, this beautiful property. You don't need family the way Mason does. That statement revealed the fundamental flaw in their thinking. They'd confused financial independence with emotional independence, assuming that because I could take care of myself financially, I didn't need or want family relationships. They'd treated love like a finite resource that had to be rationed rather than something that grows when shared. Dad needing family isn't about financial dependency. It's about belonging, about being valued for who you are, rather than for what you can provide or how much you need rescuing. Mason doesn't need more enabling, he needs parents who believe he's capable of growth. But the conversation that really mattered happened later that afternoon when Mason finally arrived alone. He looked exhausted and smaller somehow, like someone who'd just realized he'd been living in a house of cards that had finally collapsed. I read everything he said without preamble. All the social media posts, all the screenshots, Kelly's comments about what she witnessed. I had no idea it had gone that far. What did you think was happening, Mason? Did you really believe I'd just lost interest in having a relationship with my own family? He sat down heavily on my porch steps, looking out over the vineyard. I guess I wanted to believe it. It was easier than dealing with how screwed up my life had become. When you weren't around, I could pretend that everyone's low expectations for me were normal, that living with Mom and Dad at 29 was just temporary, that my lack of direction was just a phase. And when I was around, when you were around, I had to face the fact that you'd built something amazing while I'd been making excuses for years. But instead of letting that motivate me, I let Mom and Dad convince me that the problem was your presence, not my choices. This was the conversation I'd been hoping to have with my brother for years. Not the surface-level pleasantries we'd exchanged at family gatherings, but a real discussion about the dynamics that had poisoned our relationship. Mason, I never wanted to be a source of pressure for you. I wanted to be someone you could talk to about building the life you actually wanted. I know that now. But Mom and Dad made it easier to see you as the problem rather than face my own issues. They'd comfort me after family events by talking about how unfair it was that some people just had natural advantages, how success had changed you, how you probably looked down on people who struggled more. The manipulation had been even more insidious than I'd realized. My parents hadn't just been excluding me from events. They'd been using my absence to reinforce Mason's victim narrative, positioning my success as something that happened to me rather than something I'd worked for, and framing my achievements as a personal attack on his self-worth. But here's the beautiful part of the story, the karma that made everything worthwhile. By exposing my parents' manipulation tactics on social media, I'd inadvertently created consequences they never saw coming. The morning after the Easter brunch revelations, my father received a call from his business partner, whose wife had posted about the anniversary party incident. The partner wanted to know why Richard had lied about my response to their invitation and whether this kind of dishonesty extended to their business dealings. The question damaged a professional relationship my father had spent decades building. My mother's book club, several members of which had attended my Easter brunch, decided to take a break from their weekly meetings at our family home. When pressed for a reason, they cited discomfort with my mother's manipulative behavior and their realization that they couldn't trust her version of events about anything. But the most significant consequence came from an unexpected source. My grandmother, who controlled a substantial family trust fund that was meant to support family members during difficult transitions, decided to restructure the disbursement terms. She'd been regularly providing Mason with financial support based on my parents' reports about his efforts to become independent. Learning that they'd been actively sabotaging his exposure to positive influences like his successful sister, she decided the money was enabling rather than helping. If Margaret and Richard think family support means shielding people from reality, she told me during a long phone conversation, then they've misunderstood what support actually means. Real support helps people grow, not stay dependent. The trust fund restructuring meant Mason would need to demonstrate actual progress toward independence, job training, steady employment, or educational advancement to continue receiving financial support. More importantly, the new terms included a provision that family members couldn't be excluded from trust-related decisions, which meant my parents could no longer control the narrative around family financial discussions. 6 months later, Mason had moved out of my parents' guest house and into his own apartment. He'd enrolled in a certification program for project management and started working part-time for a local construction company. We'd begun having regular phone conversations, real conversations about goals and challenges and the complex work of building adult lives. My parents took longer to acknowledge their behavior, but the social consequences eventually forced a reckoning. When the majority of their social circle began questioning their trustworthiness based on the Easter brunch revelations, they finally agreed to family therapy. Not because they'd suddenly developed insight into their manipulation tactics, but because the alternative was continued social isolation. The therapy sessions were difficult and sometimes felt futile, but they created a framework for honest conversation that hadn't existed before. My parents had to confront the fact that their attempts to protect Mason had actually harmed both of their children, him by enabling dependence and me by destroying family relationships. You know what I learned from this whole experience. Sometimes the people who claim to love us most are actually the ones working hardest to keep us small. Family karma is real, and the truth always finds a way to surface. I'm curious about your experiences. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who tried to control your relationships with other people? Drop a comment and share your story, because I've realized there are so many people dealing with similar dynamics. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Share this video with anyone who might need to hear that they're not crazy for questioning family dynamics that don't feel right. Thank you for listening to my story and for all the support you've shown. Remember that choosing authenticity over approval is always worth it, even when it's hard. Your real family, the people who celebrate your success instead of feeling threatened by it, will always find their way to you. Until next time, keep believing that you deserve relationships built on love and respect, not manipulation and control. Trust your instincts, set your boundaries, and never apologize for outgrowing people who prefer you small. The Vineyard Brunch was just the beginning of building the family dynamics. I actually wanted ones based on genuine connection rather than toxic obligation. Sometimes you have to host your own celebration to discover who really wants to celebrate with you.